Thank you, everyone. Good evening and good morning. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Nuri Widyastuti Veronica. Currently, I'm studying at the Gender Peace and Security Center at Monash University. And prior to my study, I worked as a government employee at the Coordinating Ministry for Political, Legal, and Security Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia. Next slide, please. This paper starts with the introduction of the problem of what's currently happening. First, the demise of ISIS in 2017 and the eventual death of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi at the end of 2019 led the problems of thousands of foreign terrorist fighters, women and children sympathizers living in prisons and camps around Syria and Iraq. The end of territorial ISIS occupations gave sense of relief for the global community, but brought about a dilemmatic situation for countries across the world. Many Southeast Asian and European countries are dealing with the overwhelming number of FTFs and their families. Cook and Valley in 2019 mentioned the global estimate of all terrorist foreign fighters who between 2013 and 2019 joined the Islamic State was about 44,000 until 52,000, with women reaches about 6,000 until 7,000, while minors reach about 6,000. Indonesia is no exception to this problem, as about 120 until 116 Indonesian women were detected in camps on July 2019 until October 2019. And 2 women successfully self-repatriated to Indonesia at the end of 2019. I have an updated information in 2020 that the number of women in the camp is actually 509 from the total of 699 Indonesian citizens detained in prisons and camps. National and international media coverage portrayed these women's appeal to their countries of origin asking for repatriation because their livelihood in the camps is even worse than the original stances back in their countries. For Indonesia, this has led to pros and cons, especially regarding how to exercise policy on women returnees, as they were proven to possess similar threats like men jihadists. Next slide, please. After some controversies, since the last repatriation of 18 citizens in 2017, in 2020, the government of Indonesia decided not to repatriate its 699 citizens and pledged to only process the entry of children under 10 years old. Before reaching out to this decision, the Indonesian government has set up a task force in July 2019, led by the Coordinating Ministry for Political, Legal, and Security Affairs. The members are including Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Social Affairs, among others. And their main tasks are conducting intelligence data gathering, monitor the movement of Indonesian FTFs, perform operational duties, and garner interagency cooperation to design the repatriation strategy. Next slide, please. However, the government are dealing with many challenges regarding the policies on women returnees. In this case, ISIS has used a gender-specific recruitment strategy so that women as perpetrators of terrorism and violent extremism pose an imminent threat to national security. It is imperative to acknowledge women's self-agency because not all women are brainwashed and victimized. Since women are now the main actors of national security discourse, integrating gender perspective into repatriation strategies to decide upon repatriation decision, prosecution, rehabilitation, and reintegration should be a priority. They should not be treated using men's view, considering that they have specific needs and motivation of joining extremist groups. Next slide, please. This paper seeks to answer a question on how gender-specific security policies are put in place to address women returnees problem in Indonesian context. Very little research is focusing on policy-making formulation and use of gender lenses as the main tool of analyzing women returnees problem. This study wants to see whether there is any feasibility of gender-inclusive policy to prevent violent extremism and terrorism as a gendered phenomenon. In so doing, this study employs feminist international relations approach and gender analysis to investigate the repatriation, rehabilitation, prosecution, and reintegration process. Next slide, please. This research is based on qualitative interviews to representative from relevant ministry, and official interview in this analysis were selected from key agencies taking part on repatriation decision, rehabilitation, prosecution, and integration process. I have managed to interview 9 policymakers and practitioners from relevant ministries and agencies in Indonesia who have relevant job description on this issue. Next slide, please. The analysis on Indonesian women involvement in violent extremism and international terrorist groups, as well as government's response to this issue, is best examined with feminist international relations. Feminist IR tried to render women visible in national and international policymaking, as women's experience and voices are often neglected by political decision makers at the national as well as global level. The understanding and knowledge used as the basis for policymaking in dealing with terrorism and violent extremism are always based on men's experiences. Hence, women's issues in politics and international relations are marginalized, and decision-making in the field of security is bound to be primarily about men and masculinity. Feminist IR also aims to highlight and address the discrimination and disadvantage that women in particular experience in international politics. Next, please. ISIS took advantage of the weaknesses and contradictions of contemporary gendered states, such as the lack of recognition towards women's roles in the family, but at the same time enforcing men's hegemonic masculinity as the warrior and head of household, which are appealing to both women and men sympathizers. Therefore, analyzing the problem of women's migration to ISIS territory through a gender lens and employing a gender analysis will help to explore the gender dynamic of the treatment for women returnees. Thus, when the problem is taking account of women's security and insecurity, decision-making process should aim to provide gender-specific policies which are formulated specifically for either men or women. Gender-specific policies will eventually bring about gender-inclusive policies, the combination and result of sensitive based on theory and design, and responsive approaches based on operational practical that enables and enhance women's, men's, boys, girls, and sexual and gender minorities, equal representation and participation in the decision-making process. Next slide, please. On the repatriation decision, the relevant ministry assigned to the policy formulation process is the Coordinating Ministry for Political, Legal, and Security Affairs. This ministry acknowledged the importance of political decision regarding the repatriation, but there was no final decision of repatriation as of 2019. However, in 2020, the Indonesian government decided not to repatriate adults, both men and women, only children under 10 years old. The absence of political decision prevented the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to establish communication with the state and non-state actors in charge of the camps and prisons, because by doing so, it will likely give signals to SDF, Turkish, Iraqi, and Syrian government that the Indonesian government have already decided to take its citizens back. Moreover, the differing views of key agencies regarding whether women returnees are victims or perpetrators has made it very difficult to reach a consensus for a political decision to repatriate women and children from the ex-ISIS territory during the course of 2018 and 2019. Next, please. However, the Ministry of Women Empowerment and Children Protection is aware that power relations between men and women influence the way women become involved in terrorist groups. On this, I quote that, before becoming perpetrators, women previously were victims, namely victims of gender-based violence and because of power relations. Many women are threatened with divorce if they don't follow their husband. There are also women who are frustrated and desperate that they end up in terrorist groups. Girls in adolescence ages who are seeking for identity are used by those who want to recruit followers. However, women are not just victims or bystanders, but now they become perpetrators and carrying attacks, as evident by the Surabaya, Sidoarjo, and Sibolga bombers. Therefore, repatriation procedure that takes account to this propaganda and self-agency that women seek from ICE should be a priority before deciding on their return. Next, please. Regarding the rehabilitation, prosecution, and reintegration policies, Indonesia has several legal frameworks that becomes the umbrella for their actions to repatriate. And the preamble of Indonesian Constitution highlight that Indonesia should protect the entire Indonesian nation and all of its citizens, including the ISIS sympathizers. Therefore, before the decision in 2020, the government has already established two kinds of policies. It is called the before border, on the border, and after border policy, and also the by request policy. Next, please. The before border show that the government tried to establish contact with those in charge of the prison and the camps, and then conduct verification and identification of Indonesian citizens in the camps, and provide temporary shelters in neighboring countries such as Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Iraq. And there are relevant agencies in charge to this is Ministry for Foreign Affairs, the National Counterterrorism Agency, National Intelligence Body, Special Detachment 88, and Indonesian Armed Forces. It is important for the government to disaggregate data between women and children and put them in different categories since women and children require different needs. Next. At the border, before they come to Indonesia, there will be a screening mechanism to measure their level of involvement, and it will be conducted in a case-by-case basis. There is no opportunity for generalization because everything should be measured based on their level of involvement individually. Next. After the border, soon after the screening and they have already arrived in Indonesia, the returners will then be sent to rehabilitation facilities for children and facing prosecution under criminal justice system. However, this is different with the 2017 repatriation process because all adults will be prosecuted and charged with terrorism. The 2017 repatriation, women were released and the ones who were convicted were only men. Next. There are some gender-specific challenges. Although recognizing women both as loyal followers and agents of peace to disengage from extremist group, a gender-specific approach has not been set in place in repatriation policy. As an example, during the screening stage, a Special Detachment 88 or Indonesian National Police member mentioned that his unit is struggling because it is mostly consists of male members and there are only 2 experienced female officers to address women returning specific needs. An issue of coordination is also evident in the reintegration program. The leading sector for reintegration of women returnees are Minister of Interior and Minister for Women Empowerment and Child Protection. These 2 ministries have disagreed on legal basis for returnees. On the one hand, Ministry of Interior holds the view that returnees are not the victims of conflict referred in the Law Number 7, 2007-12 on the management of social conflict, as the regulation did not cover the conflict related to violent extremism. On the other hand, Ministry of Women Empowerment and Child Protection believe that returnees are the victim of ideological conflict. And also there are all the sectoral ego and problem of miscoordination between both ministries. Next, please. For women returnees dealing with prosecution, gender-specific issues occur in the correctional facilities as well. based on previous experience with female convicts. They are introverts and refuse to follow the religious program set by the facility. The refusal to communicate with guards and other inmates create an animosity atmosphere in the facility, thus hindering the successful completion of the de-radicalization program in the prisons. Moreover, lagging in standard operational procedure regarding guidelines and addressing women returnees has also caused anxiety among the guards in anticipating the flux of returnees to the correctional facilities. Next, please. In conclusion, gender-specific policies are not visible from the repatriation decision-making process and the rehabilitation, prosecution, as well as reintegration programs for returnees. It is important to provide capacity building for women guards and female officers, specifically guarding women returnees in correctional facilities. In the reintegration program, policies on women protection and on social conflict situation should include women returnees, since they have been affected by religious-based conflict. Gender-neutral problems cannot accommodate the rising involvement of women in violent extremism and terrorism. And it is very important to alleviate the problem of coordination between the relevant agencies before the repatriation process is initiated. And it is imperative to involve women leaders and CSO to discuss mechanism and policy actions. I thank you very much for your attention, and I welcome any questions regarding my paper. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Nuri, for the fruitful and beneficial findings and very insightful findings. So I think by listening to your presentation now, all of us have a very clear picture on how Indonesian government come out with the policy in order to thwart these issues specifically for women. So thank you so much, Nuri. Okay, next, I think we need to move to the Q&A session. Okay, so the first question would be from Sukaina Abdul Kadir. Are the women attracted to violent extremism are mostly economically stable and have sufficient funding? Are they mostly married or single? Okay, that will be the first question.
Okay, based on my finding, most women are not in a very homogeneous type. There are some women who are very educated, and some of them are lacking of education. For the educated women, there are some doctors that go to ISIS territory to work there to get to live under the caliphate. And there is the story of Dania. She is a single unmarried woman, and she drove to 27 of her family to go to Syria. And she is coming from a very wealthy family. And also there are the story of women from Surabaya who come to Syria and then haven't reached Syria yet. They stay in Turkey. Their family bought an apartment there to wait for their opportunity to cross over to Syria. But then they got captured by the authorities, and then they are deported back to Indonesia. So in my point of view is women in this case are really, like they call, more empowered. They are women with sufficient funding. They are stable. They are smart and intelligent. But some women are also from a very unfortunate background, such as the migrant worker in East Asia, in Taiwan, and in Hong Kong. Some of them are from a very uneducated background, but then during their time as a domestic worker, they got more involved in ISIS ideology from the social media. So this problem is a very mixed problem. That's why I mentioned that this need to be approached with case by case. So it cannot be generalized. That's my
okay. All right, thank you, Nuri. Okay, I think this will be the last question for you from Dina Becker. For women who are active supporters, could you give an example of what kind of supports that they provided?
Okay. First of all, there are some Indonesian who become suicide bombers. And it's very sad that they take their children with them. And this is the proof of how they support actively. Like they change their type of support from passive nurturing role into a operational by becoming the suicide bomber. That's the first active supporter example, in my opinion. And then they also finance and give money for the jihadis to perform their tasks, to perform their cause, to blow up. Like such as the women from the migrant worker, they send their salaries to the jihadis. And some of them also become the propaganda, like they recruit, they know how to influence other women to follow their path, such as Tutin Sugiyarti and some women in Hong Kong. Ayu, the name is Ayu. They are very smart in managing how to recruit people, especially women, to join the extremist group. So there are several active involvement, in my opinion. It's become the operative, become the financier, and become the recruiter. That's it.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much, Nuri, for your
My pleasure.
questions.
You.
All right. Okay. Actually, we have several questions. We have several questions, but yeah, we are out of time. I think if we have more time in the future, next we are moving, or we will proceed with the third speaker, Lailufar Yasmin. Please, Lailufar Yasmin.
Thank you very much. This is indeed a huge honor for me to be able to participate here and providing a different kind of experience that we have in Bangladesh. Let me share my screen. Yeah, as you can see, the title of my presentation is Women as Agents of Violence in Bangladesh, the Perks of Being Wallflowers. I mean by that, I'm coming to that a little shortly. I teach in the Department of International Relations as a professor now, and I've been teaching over 21 years. So initially my training was in international relations. Then I did work on women's studies in Georgia State University, Atlanta, and then I moved on the issue of religion, the issue of being who is modern, unmodern. That is what I did in my PhD in Macquarie University in Sydney, and from there on I started seeing a connection between violent extremism, women's role, and how generally women are perceived. So here. As you can see that in my paper as well, I have started with this very famous quote from Tennyson's poem, where basically the idea is that things are falling apart. But yes, we will fight back. We will not yield to pressures, but we will fight back. So that is the idea with which I want to, begin my presentation, and that is the idea from which I build on, because I want to show where are the points that are, we have failed or we are failing to look into, and therefore the issue of female extremism has been able to make its way in various countries. So of course, I can see that in Indonesia, a lot of work has been done. In Bangladesh, there is still a lack of general awareness regarding this, and why? That is the central, idea I'm going to present here in my paper. What are we seeing now? As from the short words that I have used, that we are seeing a new world disorder. That is, since the end of the Cold War, or when the Cold War was coming to an end, we have seen that there has been a structural instability. The very idea that state system was based on an external inviolability, meaning that threat can only emerge from, outside of your border. But what are the internal threats? Throughout the 60s, 70s, 80s, the idea was, yes, there were insurgencies, there were a lot of other issues, the issues of state terrorism, yet these were seen as a country's internal problem. These were often seen as, politically motivated by different, superpowers. But the idea is that after the end of the Cold War, when the dragons fighting out in the jungle, one of the dragon has been slain. Oh, now we have a peaceful world. But later on, we can see from 1990s the number of deaths of civilians during internal wars, during ethnic conflicts. This has been this rose to a number that the United Nations and other agencies, they started paying attention to this. That how women are victims of violence, how in different ways that civilians are being affected. But what was missing, that how gender relations often are also misunderstood in many of the analyses, such as UN initiated Women Peace Security Resolution, UN Security Council Resolution number 1325, where we can see women's involvement at all level of peace building. However, we forget to identify who a woman is, because feminism and studies on feminist IR that has advanced so far that it has often disregarded women, that women lack agency. Women are often seen as wallflowers. Women are often seen as someone that can be pushed over. And that actually created a kind of a reaction from women, those who feel that their voices are not being heard, that they want to prove themselves, that they are worthy of being heard, that women have equally, a plea for, to do anything and everything for their self-preservation. Often we have seen that women in a private sphere act differently, women in the public sphere act differently. But we have seen, I'll come to that example also a little later, but women in the private sphere, we have seen them, whatever we have seen them doing, but in the public sphere, we have seen that they are, even despite being working in, very serious areas, very important areas, they lacked a kind of voice in the decision-making process. So this is why I use the title, The Perks of Being Wallflowers. If you keep ignoring wallflowers, well, they come back with a vengeance. That often is the reason my previous speakers have pointed out, that how women are actively supporting, or passively supporting violent extremism, how gender relations need to be taken into account. So in my paper, from Bangladesh's perspective, where the cases or the numbers of women's involvement may not be, quote unquote high, but at the same time, the number of passive supporters have increased, the number of active involvement that has also increased. So something that we often miss in the, policy making level, especially in the preventing strategy. So what is the central argument of the paper? I've already submitted a first draft. Maybe after receiving comments, I'll revise it a little bit. But for now, my central argument that we traditionally understand or look at women as agents of peace, that women are peaceful, that women are mothers, that Helen D. Caldicott, a famous Australian doctor who led anti-nuclear, peaceful, different organizations in Australia, she argued very famously that because we give birth, we understand the genesis of life, and therefore we are, peaceful. So this idea of women being peaceful is widely accepted in many parts of the world, and even when policymakers are, looking at how radicalization has taken place, they often see these peace as a gendered phenomenon. So that is where I point out that perhaps we need to look into this, that women, we overlook the fact that women can also, in the Hobbesian nature of man, Hobbes is saying men are nasty, short, brutish, self-interested, they work for self-preservation. This critical feminist perspective is something that we have overlooked from time to time, and that is why we forget that often the women are active agents, and we find it surprising that being a woman, being a mother, women are supposed to be peaceful. But that is, however, not the case. And if we do not, if we fail to pay attention to this basic area, because as I said, feminist IR has progressed so far that they now want to include women. They're talking about breaking the glass ceiling, including more women in the peace process. But the thing is that if we do not address the fundamental idea that biological identity does not necessarily translates to their gender identity, and gender identity is varied. Women, can be taught, this can be untaught to both men and women. So while we say this, we make certain fundamental problems. So what are the fundamental problems that we create when we take women as peaceful agents, or women are peaceful when we take this for granted, which is generally taken for granted in many societies, even in many policy making processes. We tend to see violence as exclusively men's domain. We have these ideas: men don't cry, boys don't cry. On the other hand, women are, or whenever women say no, oh, okay, a woman is saying no because she is shy. Women is supposed to say yeah. Women are not supposed to say yes, but this no is to be translated to yes. So we therefore we fail to look into the process of de-individuation, which is a theory originating from psychology, that violent women are often seen as symptom of aberrant behavior. As in, de-individuation shows that some women are violent because they are just showing different kind of symptom, but women are generally supposed to be mothers. Women are supposed to be peaceful. Women are supposed to be caring for others. So this creates a gap in the whole process of applying preventing tactics, because in such a case we find that women are also only seen as casual participants, that women lack interest in carrying out violent means to resolve a crisis. So this misses the whole point of self-preservation. Works in the similar way that works for both men and women. So this individuation process is often overlooked, and this is what is the central argument that I present my paper with in my paper. So what are the areas of inquiry? In the empirical section of the paper, I use a number of global examples, and then of course I come to my focal point of Bangladeshi examples. So what are the global examples? We have forgotten to look into the very first women to proclaim, very first terrorist to proclaim, proclaim that I am a terrorist was Vera Zasulish, Russian terrorist, that was back in 1880s, when she was tried in the court. She was very proud of her acts. She declared that yes, I'm a terrorist because I am carrying out my particular political agenda. So women have never shied away from expressing their intentions, their political purposes. A number of studies have shown that how women, especially the movie Battle of Algiers, show how women have been carriers of grenades for Algerian freedom fighters against French occupation, and they were never checked in the check post, because French soldiers, they thought that women are peaceful, but women were carrying grenades in their handbags. They went to the pubs, they kept the handbag there, left, at a certain time the grenade blasted. So there are a number of examples. For example, IRA, women played an active role in fighting. Look at South Asian example. Before the partition of the subcontinent, there were women who were teaching men how to be active in fighting, physical firefighting, how to use pistols and other, type of guns that were available during that period of time. So women have always been a very active part of different terrorist groups. So of course you can argue one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, but it shows that women have extreme interest in preserving the political future or thinking about the political future of their territory, and therefore they won't shy away from taking up whatever action they deem necessary for doing that. Not only that, here I'll point out a few other examples of political leaders. For example, Miss Golda Meir, Miss Margaret Thatcher, Miss Indira Gandhi. They are all seen as an aberration. That strong women. They are seen as strong women. Whenever a man being strong, they are not they are not called as strong men, because it is in our psyche that men are supposed to be strong, but women are supposed to show certain feminine qualities. And that is why the Cold War is often famously said is won by Mr. Ronald Reagan, American president, and the Iron Lady Margaret Thatcher. No one calls Mr. Ronald Reagan as Mr. Iron Man, because it is in men's nature to be very strong and very persuasive and very forward looking, and all the other qualities of leadership. But when women lead, they are always a dilemma whether they are being feminine or they are being masculine. So what I'm trying to say is that when it comes to applying your national interest, men and women, they would act similarly, because we are talking about national interest, because we are talking about self-preservation, because we are talking about certain policies that are needed, that are necessary to take at a particular juncture of time. You don't have to be a woman to do that. You don't have to be a man to do that. That is, we are talking about human nature. Very few works have been done on human nature. Alison Jagger, for example, was one of the pioneering scholar who has worked on how the idea of human nature it dissuade or it sort of does not explain or take into account of women might be having similar kind of nature like men. That biological separation between men and women does not necessarily tell us that their ideas are different. So IS and Al Qaeda, they have similarly used women both in domestic role and also in fighting role. And we know the ideology that was propagated at the beginning. Al Qaeda in the beginning, they did not see they saw that women would be the women would upbring the next generation of fighters, whereas the ideology gradually with the IS changed, and they argued that women can be active part of fighting against or being a part of jihad. So we can see that in many ways women have willingly chose to become a part of this, and this is something we see as an aberration because of this our tendencies to think about women as peaceful. So here, where feminist IR has gone a lot further in involving women into peace process, into decision-making process, but the fundamental idea, if we take it for granted that violence is only men's domain, we are making a mistake, and we will not be able to see through the processes of how a woman is being radicalized. And this is what I'm coming to just 2 slides later. I'm coming to the implication of that we need to pay attention to this particular area. So here are some photos of Bangladeshi women. The very first one in 1971, you can see a woman wearing sari. Her kids are, taking care of other things, and she is casually holding a rifle. So women during 1971, and she's a rural woman. There is a huge, difference in urban-rural context, but a rural woman, even she did not hesitate to fight against during our independence war, and she thought it was her prime duty for the sake of her motherland, for the independence of her motherland. So we can see that women have never shied away from doing whatever they thought that was needed for their own country. On the on the rightmost corner and leftmost corner, the girl before being radicalized and after being radicalized, she is one of the first cases of self-radicalization from Bangladesh. Momena Shoma, she was initially a quote-unquote regular girl, and then her boyfriend boyfriend went to Syria. Her boyfriend was radicalized. Her marriage was, stopped because of that particular reason. And then she changed. She won a very prestigious scholarship. She went to Melbourne, and she simply one fine day, she stabbed her landlord and screaming about, it is a part of jihad. Apparently, she also was able to radicalize her younger sister, because when members of law enforcement agencies went to her house, the younger sister also started to attack them with a knife. So why, how, because she saw, Bomena Shoma saw that, her boyfriend who went to Syria, her marriage could not take place. And then also that she, her boyfriend in a fight died, and she felt that it was her duty to avenge the death of her boyfriend. So women can see this in various manners, but something that in traditional literature we do not pay much attention when we are making policies. In the middle is the photo of Shamima Begum, whose parents are of Bangladeshi origin, but she was born and brought up in UK. And the current controversy that UK government is having, whether to take away her citizenship or not, or they also requested Bangladesh to take back your woman, but she never was born in Bangladesh, so she has a Bangladeshi parentage, but she does not belong to Bangladesh by virtue of her birth and her nationality. There are ample examples of that. So what is the how female extremism is fanning out in Bangladesh? Till 2018 October, the numbers that I've found is 105 total. Well, for some, the 105 radicalization of women, it can be very kind of satisfactory. That is not a high number, but the fact is that till 2007 December, the first case of female women assisting in radicalization process was not identified. So we can find a huge gap. These women are peaceful, women are mothers. These discourse have influenced not to look into if women are being either active supporters or passive supporters. Before that, in 2005, in Bangladesh, there was a case where Bangla Bhai, who was an infamous terrorist who managed to detonate bombing in 62 districts out of total 64 districts of Bangladesh. He was protected, sheltered by his family members, both male and female family members. So women were protecting him. So women's this role, passive role, is often not seen while we're talking about process of radicalization in Bangladesh. Also, another very interesting thing is that we do not have adequate data because they are just reported in newspaper as merely assistance or just influence. But there's a lack of proper data, because data is not officially available. Data is with the police or the CTTC, the counterterrorism unit of Bangladesh, but those are often not publicly available. But however, I'm in the process of collecting the entire data, which hopefully when the final version of the paper would be required, I'll be able to provide. So there are also, as I said, Momina Shoma and her sister, there are also cases of self-radicalization. There are also cases of women assisting in distributing leaflets that contains jihadi contents. And I happened to interview 4 of them back in 2009 March. I talked with them because they were out of the jail on bail during that period of time. But I went there because some of my students were working with the police forces. They were provided me some shelter. So I went there to their house and I spoke with all 4 of them. And they're like, you can see their eyes. Their eyes are so different, and they're so even in a rural area, they were studying subjects like physics or other these kind of subjects, and no matter how many times I asked them that, why did you do this? Their simple answer, which shows that they are adamant on not, giving any other answer. Their answer was, we do not know. Someone influenced us, but who is this someone? And all these chains, it is very difficult to, identify that. So we can see that there are active actors and passive actors, and of course, the background stories are often, not revealed. So these are not reflected in typical prevent strategies. A number of books or researches that argue that no, this is an aberration. We are blowing this out of proportion. We are perhaps looking too much into female radicalization. But the examples of Southeast Asia is often lost here. That in Southeast Asia, how through chat boxes women were recruited, and these are the implications that I'm talking about. COVID-19 reality and the changing landscape of violent extremism has shown us that how Al-Qaeda, Taliban, ISIS together, they have opened a joint terrorism center of excellence. That is, they are going to look into these even more seriously, and how to target jobless men to recruit. I'm saying quote unquote men because we do not know yet about their intentions. They have not published any paper about this or any policy statement. So they can do it more effectively once the COVID pandemic is over, or COVID pandemic is sufficiently waning. So in light of the worsening economic health of South Asian nations, a number of articles published in Foreign Policy, you can trace the sources. I think it was around October 30. From that period of time, a number of articles were published that argued that the latest target of Al-Qaeda of Kandahar, based in Kandahar, is to recruit men from it categorically argues recruit men from India and Afghanistan. But the gender aspect of these analyses, these are completely ignored. So what are the implications for Bangladesh? As I say, there has been a feminization of joblessness in Bangladesh because a number of rapid assessment of the COVID pandemic impact in Bangladesh shows that women are the first affected people when job cuts in a company, job cuts in an office is going on. So this has created a feminization of joblessness in Bangladesh, and a number of women who are well versed in using computer, using a different kind of social network, using different kind of other gadgets, they are increasingly losing their jobs. So what will happen to them? These wallflowers who previously had some kind of access to money, now they are losing their voices completely. So they are, my assumption or my sort of fear is that they might be the first victims, and after looking after the model that was applied in Southeast Asia. Then female entrepreneurs, these are where we are talking about small entrepreneurs, and the last report that was published in September, when I was writing this paper, it showed that about 68% of the female entrepreneurs, they had absolutely no income since the lockdown lockdown in Bangladesh began from March 25. So this is a huge issue that often is not reflected in policy making. That how do we make I understand that this is a difficult time for all of us, but how they are becoming vulnerable. So that is something that is missing from the policy making process. So women take the hit of the economic ill health first, and this is often not identified. Also, it is the educated women are with expertise who might be the first victims of being radicalized in the urban areas. So we already know how online radicalization and chat box recruitments took place via some of the apps. So this is hardly being highlighted in Bangladesh, and my fear is that if we do not talk about it, if we do not make people aware of it at the policy making level, I do not know what kind of future is awaiting for us. I shall finish now by giving my concluding observation that violent extremism, in violent extremism, actors can provide, those who are in the leadership position can influence people by telling them that, yes, we are giving you agency. Women not only found those as appealing, but also they might feel that this is a way that they can avenge against, whenever they are being victims of, violence at home, or that they're losing jobs, or they feel that their voices are not being heard. So while this is applicable to both male and female actors, but the the process of female radicalization is extremely underexplored. A number of studies, that I did with USAID or UNDP, where I have seen that family is increasingly being primary source of radicalization in Bangladesh. So here women also play often active roles. Also, we need to remember that our thoughts are always translated into actions. So here, in the domestic domain, if you see the different TV shows, you can see, especially in South Asia, the kind of TV shows that are produced shows that how women are being, being at the control of, we can call, politics inside the home, how they have different kind of voices. That is often not seen. Also, I'll just finish by saying that in the case of Bangladesh, there was a female, extremist who was, when she was cornered, she held her child. She screamed to the police that if you do not grant me a safe passage, I'm going to blow up my own child. So here, the very idea that women are peaceful and women are mothers, and that is why they are peaceful, these are often we have taken for granted. But I believe that this is changing, and this is changing for various reasons. Not having agency is one of them, and this is something we need to highlight more and more in the case of Bangladesh. I'm sure this has been highlighted in the case of Southeast Asia, but here we are still lacking a bit to translate it in the policy sector. So thank you so much for listening to me, and I'll be happy to take questions now.
All right, thank you so much, Lailu, for your for the acute discovery. The factors that make them join Malaysia, based on my case study, most of the women are willingly to join the terrorist group. However, it is contrary for Bangladesh context, where the triggered reason for them to join is just because wanted to be heard. Right, so I think it is very important for us to take note on this. Okay, so I think it is better for us to move to the question. Okay, I think there is one question from Dr. Imran Ali Sandano. Okay, the question is, with your argument that women is creator, give birth, for example, give birth, she really understands the suffering, okay, in the bracket, violence plus death. Okay, so what actually reasons that force women to join such violent organizations? If your argument is human nature, then nature for men and women is the same. Okay, so what would be your answer?
Exactly. Thank you so much for such an important question. Yes, human nature for men and women are the same, but look at the different UN conventions, look at the WPS agenda, Women Peace Security agenda. All of these take it for granted that we include more women in the peacemaking process, peace will be established. But they hardly point out that human nature is similar for both, or same for both men and women, but mostly women act or women operate in the private sphere, and that is why their public sphere activities are often ignored. That is what I'm pointing out. Yes, women, because I when I mentioned that women understand the genesis, women understand the pain of birth. This is an argument that is given by Helen D. Caldicott, as I mentioned. She was an Australian doctor. She was at the forefront of anti-nuclear protest in Australia, and she argues that because women give birth, they are peaceful. Because women can create life, she is peaceful. Unfortunately, this particular line of argument has taken over as well. So the voices of critical feminists like us, it is often not there. It is often not being heard. Even in Bangladesh, when we are creating prevent strategies, we are taking it for granted. No, no, no. Women did not do it purposefully. Women were just influenced by their brother or by their husbands. In few cases, yes, but those are, aberrations. Those are not normal. So we do not need to be so serious. So that is what I'm trying to point out, that here the realization is yet to appear that yes, women can be violent. Women are capable of being violent. And this is what UN agenda is also. They're talking about, giving more women jobs. But by giving more women jobs, are they addressing the fundamental problem that, personal is political? When a woman is going to job, she also needs other assistance. And we have seen even World Economic Forum just few days back, published this article that COVID-19 has actually showed how unequal a burden of work at home is shared by women. That women are doing not only working, but they are taking off all household works, and that is the percentage is very high, and the percentage of men being equal partners is also very low. So all of these we need to take into consideration, because feminist IR talks about including women in the decision-making process, but they do not see what is happening in the private sphere. A woman is taking part in the decision-making process outside, but when she is coming home, she is again going back to being a woman. But I'm not saying being a woman is wrong. Anyone can choose to be a woman, but at the same time, whether she has a decision-making voice in her house, that is also an area that has gone overlooked. That is the point of this discussion, that women are not always peaceful just because she may have a good job. She is earning money, because often in many cases in Bangladesh, we have found that they earn a good salary, but the money is just given back to the husband, and the husband makes key economic decisions for the household, because a man always knows better. So this is something in South Asia you will see. So my fear is that as recruitment, the idea of recruitment is emerging from Kandahar-based Al Qaeda. So I'm worried that with how this will affect Bangladeshi women. Anyone there? Any other questions?
Hello. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
So, the next question would be coming from Akil Yunus. With female extremism representing the new frontier for terrorist actors, what kind of tailor-made narratives are then necessary to dissuade them from violent recourse? Is it different from the CVE measures that are traditionally catered to male extremists?
Hi, Akil. It's nice to, I'm not able to see you, but nice to see that you were there on the other side. The thing is that in Bangladeshi narratives, what we have tried to do, 2016, 1st of July, that holy artisan attack, that actually opened up our, opened up our mind to that some different kind of extremism is going on. We have not seen this happening for a long time. In my paper, I have identified four phases of terrorism / violent extremism in Bangladesh. There is always a terminological issue here. In Bangladesh, after that, the CTTC has taken a number of steps which has helped us to counter, violent extremism. For example, community level engagement, community level awareness. For example, if you are seeing someone new in a locality, try to socialize with them. And also here we have this policy that if you have a new tenant in a house, they have to fill out a particular form, and this has to be submitted to the local police station, so that you have track record of all the people living in a particular area. So this is being done, but at the same, and this has seen a very positive impact, that people are increasingly being aware, cautious. But despite that, what I'm thinking that this whole COVID period, the way people have been using gadgets, the way people are engaged with the social media and different kind of apps. So I'm not sure that how far this process is now going on. Although in Bangladesh, a lot of already we are seeing the classic traffic jam happening, meaning a number of institutions, number of offices are now opening up, and our we are battling with COVID quite better than we expected we would. Vaccines are coming here, so. But I'm not sure that how far new jobs are being created. So during this whole process, this is the time when we have to cautiously watch. We have to cautiously watch out for the signs of female involvement in radicalization.
All right, thank you, Lailufar. Okay, there are several questions that are waiting for you to answer. However, we need to proceed with the last speaker, okay, due to the time constraint. So I think we will proceed with Dina Zaman. Thank you, Prof. Lailufar.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good day, very good evening to everyone, wherever you are. Before I begin, I'd like to thank START, University of Maryland, ISTAC, everyone, and all the panelists for having me here tonight. I know it's very late in Kuala Lumpur right now, it's 9:30. So bear with me, I'll do my very best to entertain you. What I'll do is I'll give you a brief background on women, on their identity crisis as to why there's embracing a certain brand of Islam which can be considered very hateful, and then we'll talk about fieldwork notes which I personally participated with 2 fixers. So yeah, let's begin. Next please, next slide. Right, so I think we all know what violent extremism is all about. In Southeast Asia, while we do have a problem with violent extremism, terrorism, what we are seeing now, especially in Malaysia, Indonesia, is a rise of hateful extremism. So I'd like to all of us to actually look at hateful extremism as part of violent extremism, yeah? Now, it's had a significant impact on individuals, communities, institutions around the world, and I think all of us are quite well versed with what ISIS has done, a few years ago. In Southeast Asia, in Malaysia, we don't only have the problems of ISIS, we also have other militant groups like JI, Al-Qaeda, and other homegrown units, yeah? So counterterrorism financing continues to increase. And while it's overlooked, women and girls are affected by the phenomenon in unique and different ways. So for today, the presentation is about how women, especially professional women, use their consumer power, and either they get involved, they willingly get involved in militant groups or not. But the fact is they have money and they also want to make a difference. Next, please. Next slide. Yeah. Okay. So like a lot of Malaysian men, Malaysian women are actually grappling with this identity crisis. And this is something which Iman has been looking at for the last few years. I think if you look at local newspapers, think tanks, research houses like Merdeka Center and so forth have been noticing a trend of Malaysian Muslims sympathizing with radical groups like IS, JI, and so forth. Now, why is that? Partly because, as Dr. Ahmad El-Muhammadi said last night, there is the issue of political radicalization. In Malaysia, you will see that our communities are all very fractured, disenfranchised from each other racially and economically. So because of that, and what you see in the papers, what you read, right? For many Malaysians, there are some who are not bothered. They're just more interested in the bread and butter issues, but there are some who say, look, we need to make a change. Next slide, please. So a lot of them, especially the ones that we interviewed, Iman, yeah? Many have expressed that they feel that they're at siege. They're not good enough. Malay Muslims in Malaysia are seen as corrupt, lazy. What on earth? How do they actually, change that perception? When you look at women, and we actually participated and helped Wonderman Thompson in their 2017 report, yeah? It forecasted that the Muslim consumer market was estimated at 1.9 trillion. And there were two trends, which is more Islamic and yet global, which has created a space of conflict, negotiation, adaptation, and innovation that's playing out across sectors. The Muslim women demographic has money, is social media savvy, wants to look good, but religion is very important to them. Now, I have a caveat, I'd like to say this. You can be very religious, but you don't have to be a terrorist. So I keep telling everyone this because every time you talk about Muslims or religious or observant of their faith, everyone thinks that they're all radicals, which is not true. I'd say maybe, 80-90% of us are not like that. We're pretty moderate. But we do have that problem of, Malaysian men and women becoming more extreme in their thinking, in their feelings, and especially when they other races and other religions in the country. So, okay, they're very well versed with the internet, which I've seen that. It's become very urgent for many Muslims in Malaysia. This is due to the fact that they realize public perception of Muslims is not favorable. One, the 9/11 attacks is still hanging over our heads, yeah? Muslims are seen as regressive, backwards, rigid, and potential terrorists. And, like last year, all of us, and we're still going through the COVID pandemic, we saw a spike in more hateful behavior towards migrant workers, refugees. And you're seeing that despite their religiosity, despite them professing that they are Muslims, the resentment towards other races, other people was becoming more hateful. Next, please. Right. So, okay, I mentioned earlier, Islam is very, very important to them. For a lot of Muslim men and women, and increasingly for Muslim women, supporting halal businesses and Muslim enterprises are very, very important, even if it means that they go into debt. It's very fascinating when we had this discussion with these women. Why are you in credit card debt? Is it because you want that, the hijab? Is it because you want that jubba? And is it no? My spending this much means that business is going to be actually, is going to excel. After all, the Chinese also support their Chinese businesses. Why can't I support a Malay or Muslim business? They're still trying to grasp global complexities. This is even among the professional class. There's resentment and distrust against non-Malays, economic advancement, as well as towards their fellow Malay brothers and sisters who are successful. And when it comes to their fellow Malay brothers and sisters, many of them said they probably have cables, they're politically connected, they're from a family that's established, that's why they get all the breaks. So the resentment is there. And you see this translated in the conversation and in discourse that we are having now, even as, as current as this month, where a lot more Malay Muslims are grasping on to a more hateful campaign, for example, like Buy Muslim First, but we'll get back to that later. The professional class has actually confessed that they feel that they lack social capital. Now, this is very surprising when you explain to them, look, you have that car, you've got that condo or house, you went overseas to study, why do you feel this way? It's probably a question for psychologists, but for us, where does this lack of confidence come from? Could it be from the government policies in Malaysia where Malay Muslims are always told that you have to depend on the government to be successful? What drives them to think this way? There's also a lot of internalized misogyny. The women are highly educated, they hold jobs, they speak English. Next slide. Right. So let's look at the Malaysian experience. There is a rise in women's involvement in violent extremism and terrorism. 44 women were arrested for terror-related activities, 6 under the Prevention of Crime Act, 2 under the Prevention of Terrorism Act. We also have returnees from Syria, which include women and children. Next slide. Okay, so let's look, at who are these women? Right. So, we've always heard the stories, and especially like the earlier speakers have spoken about how a lot of people think women involved in militant activities are rather passive. They're not very intelligent. They're from a rural background. I think our research and, my colleagues' research have proven that many of them are very educated. So if before, they played the role as a mother and wife, raising the next generation, taking care of my jihadi husband, now they've become propagandists and recruiters. They're very, very active. They also facilitate with a network that enable recruitment. They plan, they plot, they attack. We've actually met one Malaysian woman who's left the country. She worked for the big four accounting firms, went off to LSE and all that. And, she's fundraising for IS. She's teaching the kids how to speak English. And she knows how to, as she said to us, she's never going to come back to Malaysia because this is home for her. Next slide, please. Right, so I'm just going to give you a brief, overview of some of the women, right, who we've spoken to. A has pledged allegiance to IS, in possession of 12 books on extremism, very active participant in Telegram groups, planned to travel to Syria. There's an unnamed 14-year-old, a toughest student, even though she's female, yeah, and was detained en route to Cairo to marry a 22-year-old Malaysian fighter. Okay, this was a person that I mentioned earlier, the accountant, befriended the wife of JI member, Kat H, raises funds for IS families. Then there's Dr. C, who traveled to Syria and married Moroccan fighter, blogged her experiences on Diary of a Muhajirah. B, engaged in discussions on religion and jihadi activities, received and disseminated IS ideology and part of many, many Usrah groups, which extended not just in Malaysia, but right up to Indonesia. There's also an unnamed 51-year-old who's a housewife. She's the leader of a woman IS cell, plotted an attack on a polling station, sometime in May. I think that probably was after or on our previous general elections. Next slide. So for the next half, I'll be talking about the rich, the gullible. I know this is a pretty, not a very nice header, but just to explain to you, for the last 10 years, I've been observing this group of moneyed women. And, with the rise of Salafi or Wahhabi understanding of Islam, I thought, okay, this is a trend that begs to be looked at. And it's very easy, a lot of people have asked, why do a lot of men and women in Malaysia fall for the Salafi brand or Wahhabi brand of Islam? It's what I would call a very minimalist idea of Islam. There are many practices, rituals that we Muslims do that you no longer do if you follow that stream. So who are the rich women who participate in hateful extremism, whether they know it or not? Yeah, partly there's a lot of guilt. A lot of them were professionals. Some of them have never worked. But, they have this religious crisis at the age of 30, 40 and realize, I've done a lot of partying. I led a very secular life. I think it's time that I repented so that I could go to heaven and be a good Muslimah. They also outsource a lot of their thinking to other people. And I think this is very emblematic of Malaysia, where we're not taught how to think critically in school. So maybe the word is not simple-mindedness, yeah? But right now, perhaps that is the word that we can describe. They don't want to think. They would rather outsource. It's just like getting, someone to drive you around. There's also peer validation, elitism, and snobbery. There's also desperation and earnestness and lack of critical and objective thinking. Peer pressure is very, very important and something we all need to look at when you talk about women with money and, radicalization. You see, for many of us Muslims in Malaysia and other countries, when you learn about Islam, you look for a proper religious scholar. But with this group, not all of them are legitimate religious scholars. I know one who took up a tafsir, Quranic tafsir class for 2 years. And suddenly she's now teaching all the women in Kuala Lumpur how to tafsir, to interpret the Quran. She is not a scholar. We don't know who she was taught by, but it was a foreign teacher. Another place that you have to look at would be the Usras. There's this colonialist mentality, yeah? If the teacher is foreign or a white revert, and I don't mean any disrespect, but it's like that, yeah? They are good. So they just accept you. There are very, very few Malay religious teachers. If there are Asians, they tend to be Indonesians. And again, it doesn't mean just because an Indonesian ustaz or ustazah, they're terrorists or radicals. Money is power. To understand them is to understand their psyche. With money, they think they can get away with it. And in Malaysia, you can get away with a lot of things if you have money and power. Next slide. So I'm going to give you examples from the field, which I personally undertook, and I work with two fixers. How do you get access? Yeah, it's not very easy to get access into these verified groups. One, you either have to be born into that family, you either have that network, or you're actually, part of that cool crowd. I had to do some acting. Uh, and it was very interesting. We looked at two foundations. Let's look at Foundation A. It was founded in 1973. Extremely wealthy organization, background, political dynasty. Members are of the upper class or elite Malays. Yeah, they have been known to give very charitably to fund, to charities that the ustaz or ustazas that teach at this foundation. Yeah, they have a weekly usrah class of 1 or 2 teachers who have been known to be involved in IS recruitment. There's also a huge class element there. To enter this class, right, you have to be vetted by someone in the group, and they will look at your ranking. So if you have the Chanel 255, you are of a certain class, you sit right at the front. If you have a Kate Spade or Coach, you sit right at the back. I know it's it's quite bad, isn't it? But that is how they work. B, there's another foundation who's founded by a revert. Now, he is, I wouldn't say he's problematic, but he can be considered controversial because there'll be some who say he's actually not a radical. But at the same time, when there are some enforcement agencies and when we observe, he can be actually very radical in his thinking. So this person has held prominent Islamic positions. His community is huge, right? He's got a prominent youth group that holds regular activities. He espouses a more fundamentalist message and promotes a pan-Islamic, thought, and has been known to invite controversial speakers that profess a more divisive message. One of them is Zakir Naik. The other one that we did was conducted in a local institution. Now, while they've been it was thought that they supported IS. Many of them were more, I would say they leaned more toward JI, yeah? Now, they were all English educated professionals. They were highly, highly political. This interview was done in 2018. They actually told us that, yes, we know that the current government will sink and that soon Dr. Mahathir will be, and we know the chaos that will happen when Dr. Mahathir becomes prime minister. But that is fine for them because they said we're biding our time. All this would actually, work out well for them. Next slide. Okay, so basically all of them are looking for Allah, yeah? Now, the X Foundation, the Ustaz I mentioned earlier, now, it's not impossible that close relationships would lead to individual donations. So, once you have this relationship, at that particular Usra, yeah, this particular Ustaz said, okay, I need this for this certain charity overseas. Everyone, the women just took out all the money. One was carrying a few thousand ringgit of cash in her bag and gave it straight. Now, the question is, who is this charity? What is this charity? Where is the money going? Yeah. Now, for the Y Foundation, the one that's founded by the revert, he actively solicits donations from the congregation. There's a letter of undertaking. Everything's very formal, so it looks pretty good. So far, there hasn't been any complaints of where the money is heading. Now, female interaction. In both groups, the women were more vocal. And the women who were more vocal were the ones who were financially independent or stable and were there of their own accord without the husband's presence. One of the things that we need to realize when you talk about, the wealthy usras, right? It's always the women who actually set the tone of religious undertakings and lessons at home. So the husbands will be doing, all that work, brokering deals here and there. The wives will be home and say, okay, we're going to go to this ustaz, this person is going to come to the house, and that is how we shall all be educated. Now, the most usrah messages tend to be very mild. I've been in 1 or 2 where they were suspect, but nothing to be worried about. But some of the Ustras can also be rather worrying. One of the Ustras that we attended actually spoke the need for the preparedness of Islamic nations, which dwelt quite greatly on the preparedness to go to war, which was concerning. So they won't talk about we have to fight against, non-Malays or non-Muslims. It's done in a very layered manner, where you start thinking, did he say that or did he not say that? Yeah. I have been in Ustras where the teacher found me rather suspicious, probably because I was a new face. And he asked, are you a Sufi? Are you a Maliki? Are you a Hanafi? Are you a Shafi'i? And I said, goodness. I said, well, I am from the Shafi'i school of thought. And they said, that is bid'ah. You cannot say slawat, a certain incantation, a Quranic name, salutation to the Prophet, sorry. So, you see these people moving that way, trying to suss you out, and you think, okay, it's not a very welcoming place. But once they realize that you are like them, they'll open up a little bit more. Next slide, please. All right. This is one that we've been observing. I've not been able to penetrate. This is conducted by Sheikh Zobir Bushini, now Bushiki. From the little we gather, he was in trouble in the US. He was actually asked to leave the States because of certain reasons which we were not able to gauge, yeah? But he has a patron. He teaches at only wealthy areas. He teaches at home, so the police aren't able to just crash into someone's home because it's a personal private lesson. But I know members who've actually attended, and they've actually told me that IS is a creation of the Freemasons. They're really the friends of us Muslims. All these are all made up by the Malaysian government. Follow this person's way. We Malays need discipline. Hence, that's why you have to go to Sheikh Zubir, because he'll tell you what real Islam is all about. Next slide, please. So the question is, where does it all go? All that money. What do you do with this? Where do you go? A lot of us have discussed. See, this is hawala system, right? Where instead of putting money into a bank account, I can just give you that money and then it goes here and there. You don't see that money going anywhere. I've actually had discussions with women who actually give, a lot of money to what you call schools that's being founded by so-called reverts. And then when you actually do some background checks, these people don't actually exist, the schools don't exist. But a lot of women who have that kind of money, again, as I say, want to outsource their guilt, want to outsource their thinking, say, look, I want to give you this money. As long as I feel good, I go to heaven, you can take it. I don't want to know anymore. It's very simplistic in their, in their thinking, but it's also very worrying because you think, where do you go? What are you doing with that money? Why aren't you thinking about this? Why aren't you being critical about this? Yeah. I would like to add on more things, but I've been told that I just got maybe less than a minute. So why don't we just have a Q&A session and we'll take it from there. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Dina Zaman, for the interesting discussion. I think your finding is very rooted in explaining the current situation of radicalized women in Malaysia. Okay. However, due to the time constraint, I think we will move to the Q&A session. So the first question would be from Dr. Imran Ali. Okay, the question would be, Dear Dina, identity crisis in general has greater academic agenda, but women identity crisis varies with geography and ideology in the bracket religion. Malaysia may be the one of case. How you will generalize the woman identity crisis?
Okay.
Right, that would be the question.
All right. That's a pretty tough one. Okay. I do agree with Dr. Imran in the sense that when you talk about identity crisis, whatever gender you are, it varies, with their geography, with their ideology. What's happening in England may not be the same as in Malaysia or Indonesia or the Philippines. But in the case of Malaysia, how does one generalize the identity crisis? I think for one, in Malaysia, that's always, okay, before we get to the women bit, yeah? there's always a racial crisis. If you look at our media, look at our discourse, we go to our forums, the Malays are always, asking for their rights. The non-Malays are also asking for their rights. We're always having an identity crisis, and we're always pushing back the space to take back, what we feel has been lost. Now, a majority of it is because during the Barisan Nasional rule, where one's identity was shaped by a government, right? Now that Barisan Nasional is no longer around, and we've had Pakatan Harapan, that so-called rudder, that so-called anchor has gone. So you see, when you look at Malaysia, yeah, during the Pakatan Harapan time and even now, there's a rise and increase of pro-Malay, pro-Islamist groups. And they're just popping around like, basically like, like mushrooms. If I had time just now, I would actually have linked that earlier study to the pro-Islamist, pro-Malay groups that we're seeing right now. So a lot of our identity crisis, whether we're women or men in Malaysia, is driven by the political shenanigans that we're seeing right now. One moment we're like this, next moment we're like that. Look, we've got a lockdown. Suddenly we have an emergency. You look at our economy, things are getting more expensive. People are losing their jobs. Where do you go? So when you talk about Malay Muslim women, with all that's happening right now, you turn to God. And isn't that what most Muslims or believers do when you have a crisis, when you have a problem? You turn to God. Whether it's to Allah or to the Christian God, who else do you have? Especially when you cannot rely on a government nor a certain, system, governance. So I hope that answers you. All right. Next question.
Okay, next question would be coming from Indo, all right? Most of the time, women have been executive head of, okay. Where's the question? Okay, how would you see the discussion of women involvement in VE would pressure on those women who prefer to be conservative or those wearing niqab?
I'm sorry, Adila, I can't hear you. Can you repeat the question?
Again? Yeah, sure. Okay, the question would be, how would you see the discussion of women involvement in VE would pressure on those women who prefer to be conservative or those wearing niqab?
Okay. I'd like to make this clear that even if a woman is a very observant, Muslim, right? She's highly observant, she's very conservative. It doesn't mean that he or she will actually end up being, violent or extreme. I would consider my family conservative in the way they conduct their prayers, their rituals as Muslims, but I don't think they have radical ideas. What we need to look at is not at whether the person is conservative or liberal or moderate. We need to look at why why are we participating in such a radical movement? Yeah, is it because of political radicalization? Is it because we're pushing back against the state? And I mentioned earlier about the lack of social capital. How can we actually say that we lack social capital when we're supposed to be Malaysians, we're supposed to be one of the richer countries in Southeast Asia, we're multicultural? Where does that angst come from? And the fact is that also that in Malaysia, right, identity, whether it's racial or religious, is always contested. Whether you're a liberal Muslim or a conservative Muslim, we're always at odds with each other. Now, where do you meet? Halfway. It's the same thing with with religion. With race. One of the things that I would want to look at is at the class divide of Muslims, because you will see that Malay Muslims from Bangi are very different from the Malay Muslims of Damansara Heights. So there is also that class element, which actually plays a lot into a person's mindset and how he or she actually grasps Islam. So I don't know, does that answer your question?
All right. Okay, we still have 4 minutes. I think we still can proceed with the last question. Is it okay with you, Dina?
Okay lah.
Okay, all right. I think this question would be interesting. Coming from Owais Rashid, if we analyze the role of women in violent extremism across the world, do you think that despite Islam being major religion involved in extremism, the women's participation is comparatively low among Muslims? Bearing ISIS, be it Taliban, militancy in Kashmir, or even Al-Qaeda, we find very little evidence of women involvement when compared to LTTE or Western extremist group in parts. So what would be your answer on this?
This is like a PhD viva. Okay. I would agree in a sense that, when you look at violent extremism, right? Well, yes, there is an increase of women participating in militant activities, either as a supporter or, someone as an active participant. It is relatively low. But I will admit that I haven't done a comparative study of Muslim women's involvement in militant activities versus to those who are involved in LTTE or other Western extremist groups. So I won't be able to answer that fully. But I think that, we also have to look beyond religion. You have to look at the context of the country. You have to look at what is happening. I think that if we were to do comparative study between women involved in IS and women who are involved in LTTE, we may find similarities and also differences. So maybe the focus shouldn't be on so much on religion, but also the political disparity, economic disparity that you see from that country or that community. I hope that answers your question always.
All right. Okay, it's already 10 p.m. and the clock is ticking. All right. So by answering the last question and due to the time constraint, I think it is better for us to end our session tonight. So thank you so much, everyone, for your time and have a wonderful day. Thank you, Dina.
Thank you very much. Selamat malam, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Selamat malam.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.